Hello, everyone. I know that there's different times throughout the year, holiday season, summertime, spring break, fall break. There are different times throughout the year that there's some downtime in your practice. During this downtime, it can be challenging to be able to meet your service hours or to be able to continue to serve your clients. But there are ways to be able to help our clients, even when they're not available to us, that they may be on vacation or they may be engaged in other activities. Today, I'm going to talk about using the downtime to be able to complete your integrated assessment treatment plan, completing the IM+CANS requirement for assessment. Now, this particular time period, it can do a couple things. One is we can make sure and get my service hours, and I don't have to worry about adding new clients because sometimes I might be at the max for my caseload, but I just have this temporary downtime. So then I want to be able to keep my service hours up so I don't end up with new case assignments for me when I can really function well when there's now not this downtime. The other thing is the consumer experience and the practitioner experience of completing the IM+CANS or completing the assessment for Medicaid clients has been reported to be one of the a significant barrier to services. One is we don't want the consumer experience to be inefficient or look like we're only focused on paperwork. And two, it can be hard to be able to complete all of the required paperwork and the required assessment process for the IM+CANS during the initial assessment meeting with clients. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we're able to improve that experience and review some of the content that you've already seen in some of the billing presentations that I've done previously. First, we'll go into the definition, and you can find this through the Behavioral Health Provider Handbook, which I'll put a link on the end of this presentation. In this handbook, it provides this definition. Anytime we can, we want to use words in our actual progress notes from the definition. And so the definition says we can do this clinical interview, may or may not be possible during this time. Although it could be, maybe we can do a phone interview. Maybe we can even look at discussions or interviews of parents, guardians, or other collaterals. Maybe it's a teacher, a school social worker, or school provider in some way. Maybe they're already seeing a primary care provider. Maybe they've seen a previous therapist. There may be the ability, if we have releases of information, to be able to have these conversations. But regardless, we also have the ability to review documentation, review records as part of that assessment process. Now, for some of you, you have someone that is Medicaid eligible, they have Medicaid, and you just haven't had the opportunity to complete the IM+CANS that would then allow us to start reimbursing for Medicaid. In doing so, what we want to be able to do, although we're leaning on a grant right now, we know that the process is that grants are not considered the primary payer sources and that we're supposed to be using Medicaid reimbursement first instead of the grants. And so in doing so, we may be a little bit out of compliance with those grant funding requirements, but we can clean that up easily by getting an IM+CANS into the record. And so getting that IM+CANS, I can start to look at all of my previous documentation and I can start to review whether it's my records or somebody else's records, or if it's things that have been sent in to us, record sharing, that I can start to review that information and begin to complete the IM+CANS, even when my patient and their family are not available to me during these periods of downtime throughout the year. So let's review a little bit about the IETP review or reassessment process. First, it may seem like a review that you maybe have already done an intake previously, maybe through a grant-funded project or a no-funded project, and working with those clients or those individuals. And now you're doing what may feel like a review, but it's really just an initial IETP. So in that, there's an initial intake, because from Medicaid standpoint, if you've not been reimbursing with them, none of that previous work matters to them. So instead, it's like you're doing an initial. It's like they're a new client, even though they're not new to you, they're new to the Medicaid reimbursement service. So then you're not really doing a review or reassessment or update. Instead, you're doing an initial. So if you've never done an IM+CANS on a client before, then you're doing an initial IM+CANS, regardless if you've been working with this patient or family for even years prior to doing that IM+CANS. Now, for those of us that may already have an IM+CANS in the record, we then want to do an update within 180 days. So that's within 6 months. Oftentimes, Minthia will put in there that there's a review or an update that's due, and she'll have due dates for that. Also, in your to-do list, what you're going to get is you're going to see at 150 days or 5 months in to treatment that you'll see there will be a reminder to do an updated treatment plan in your to-do list for every client. When you see that reminder, you know you have 30 days from the time you start to the time you complete, meaning everybody has signed the signature page. So you've had the family sign it, you've had the youth sign it, you've signed it, and the LPHA has signed that document, all on dates within the 30 days so that we don't end up expiring after 180 days. So what we'd encourage is start that early at 120 days. If you feel like at 3 months, if you feel like there's you want to be able to, or at 4 months, if you want to be able to update that, or if you need to update it. And many people I've talked with have started, they've done an IM+CANS, but maybe they only put counseling and therapy as the only option for services. But then they're like, oh, what about case management mental health, where I can identify and investigate resources, connect families with resources, give families options, help be able to complete applications and referrals, all of those types of things that may not be included. Or I want to do client-centered consultation, where maybe I want to work with the teachers or educators or support staff in a child's life, that I want to work closely with them and I want to try to help improve the classroom experience or their ability to be able to manage behaviors or work with my client effectively. And so those things, client-centered consultation or case management, mental health, those types of activities, if it's not a service type within the IM+CANS, then that is not an allowable activity. So those are things that many people have told me they want to update their IM+CANS to be able to include that. If I'm doing a review or an update, what I want to be able to do, if I'm changing the service types, the goals or objectives, or the diagnosis, any of those, I need to do an update. So I don't go into my IM+CANS portal and just change or edit the existing document. I'm going to add a new document there, and I'm going to do an update. A lot of my update, though, will be reviewing the record of the previous IM+CANS, right? Because I'm not going to ask them questions I already know answers to. That's a poor consumer experience. And I'm able to review records, and that is very much a Medicaid reimbursable service activity or service hour. Now, if I get beyond the 180 days, and again, that is based on signatures, not based on when I started the IATP process or the IM+CANS. So it doesn't matter if I started it at 179 days. If I didn't get my signatures until 185 days, then that is now no longer is it an update or review. That is a new IATP. That is a new assessment. That is a new intake. They're considered a new client at that point. So if I get past 6 months, then what I'm doing is I need to update my consent forms, my releases of information, my client registration form, and of course, my signature page. And whenever I'm doing my service type, I'm going to name this, it is an initial IATP service type. All right, just as a reminder, in this, when we're in the system and we're doing an update or review, we want to say add new IM+CANS. We're going to add that. We're not going to edit the existing document. We're going to add a new one to it. Once we click that add new IM+CANS, we have the ability to say initial or reassessment. If I've already had an IM+CANS and now I'm changing that, I'm going to do a reassessment. Doesn't matter if it's 30 days in. If it's only been a month since my previous one, I want to do a new assessment, a reassessment. As you know, the master record, we want to make sure and complete this before we actually start an IM+CANS document. So here, above here is the client master record. You want to be able to have that there prior to creating that IM+CANS. So you want to update this. The good thing is if they're an existing client with me, or maybe there's records that others have put into our therapy note system, I can start to transfer this information. So if you look at legal name and date of birth and address and phone numbers and sexual orientation, gender identity, and ethnicity and language, many of these same items will also be in the master record. So I've started my IM+CANS, or my integrated assessment and treatment plan. I've started that as soon as I start collecting or updating my master record, updating it with a review or creating if it's an initial IM+CANS. So when I'm doing that, I'm going into the chart and I'm transferring information over. That is part of the record review. That is me reviewing records for the future assessment, the diagnosis, and selection of service types for medically necessary services. So I start doing that. Also, this is just a sample record here. Now, this one has an IM+CANS in it, but assume it doesn't have an IM+CANS in it. When I'm looking at this, there are several different resources or sources of information. If they previously had an intake note, that's a great source, right? I'll pull that up. I'm looking whether I did it or somebody else did it. I'm reviewing that record, and I'm putting that information into the IM+CANS that the state of Illinois says that is the tool to appropriately identify needs, strengths, connect them to a diagnosis and to certain service types. So I'm taking this information, I'm reviewing records, and I'm utilizing that assessment tool that is called the IM+CANS, and I'm entering that information in. But I'm not just entering, I'm also using that or letting that information kind of sink in for both my selection of diagnosis and which service types that would be appropriate for that treatment. But we've got several different sources to be able to get that information in an existing client record. In our intake note, we want to provide information such as needed to assess client for needs, strengths, medical necessity, and services to be provided. Here, it may not say clinical interview if I didn't have the family present, but maybe I conducted a review of documents and reviewed information to formulate a diagnosis and service interventions. The rest of the time, most of the time, I'm going to say see IM+CANS in there. This gives you a nice guideline, and you can pause this or use the PowerPoint that I'll send out with this video. In this, what I want to just point out here is that we want to be using F codes for diagnoses. Every diagnosis needs an F code. So IM+CANS should result in an F code there. As a reminder, as you're doing your IM+CANS, if you end up in these subscales, one, you only want to do subscales that are within the age range. So as you see here, these are 16 and older. So if I'm doing an assessment with a 10-year-old, I actually don't answer these questions at all. So I don't put a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3. I don't put anything in there. I skip those items if there's age-specific criteria that it'll say there. Now, let's say I'm serving a client that is 16 or older. If I'm doing so and their score ends up being a 2, like with the parent caregiver role, anything 2s or 3s, I need to provide supplemental information. And if there is a subscale, like in this one, that parental or caregiver role, there's an E, that subscale, that reminds me I need to go and do the subscale E to complete that information there. Remember, we're also, although you might have more specific objectives that you're going to put in your therapy notes, treatment plan, Here, we want to be able to go with general goals and objectives. And we want to have those general goals to be reduce the impact and symptoms of the diagnosis. So reduce impact and symptoms of anxiety disorder, of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, of adjustment disorder. And then the objective is to reduce the symptoms of blank, adjustment disorder with mixed disturbance of emotion and conduct, et cetera, et cetera. When we're getting down to the areas where we're building out, and this is a reminder about how to do treatment plans. This is in previous assessments as well, or previous training as well, but I want to make sure and review this because I think the extra information is helpful. And we've noticed trends of needing this information throughout our organization. We want to select the goal number. We can select that by hitting the check mark over here, and the check mark will allow me to edit that document or that section, I mean. And so in that, I want to select the goal number. What that ends up doing is that creates a thread that connects needs and strengths to goals, objectives, and service types. All of these things is called the golden thread. All of these things should be connected together in some way. And so by selecting goal number 1, and that can be the only one you need, that's totally fine. Goal number 1 in identifying the need areas or strength areas that I hope to be able to focus on in treatment, or we hope to focus on in treatment, then I'm selecting the goal areas that I'm going to link now everything else with. As you can see, by selecting that goal area, 01, selecting 1 and just doing that, and all the areas that you think you're going to address in this treatment episode, and not just needs, but also strengths or functioning areas, etc. By doing so and selecting those, it all pulls down naturally into the treatment plan. You're going to see this, and you're going to see it defaults as saying 01 if you selected 01 as the goal number. All right, so that matters because that creates this golden thread that connects all of these things together. So now my action items, I'm doing something about them, whether it's a need, strength, functioning area, whatever it is. I'm going to focus on those things. Those are my targets, and I'm putting 01. And now I'm connecting a goal by using the same number. By saying 1, now I've connected my goal to that. By saying 1.1 for my objective, now I'm connecting my objective to the goal and to the action items. And then by each service type, by selecting 1.1.1, I'm connecting action item and goal 1 with objective 1 with service type 1. And then I'm going to continue that trend. By doing so, we link all of this information together into one particular target or treatment goal and objective. All of this ties together by sorting it with these numbers. All right, so then oftentimes what I'm finding is that sometimes people are still working on the goals and objectives. We've seen this improve significantly, and many people are already doing this, that we want to reduce the symptoms of something, and we want to reduce those specific symptoms. All right, so reduce the symptoms and impact of whatever the diagnosis is, and then maybe there's specific symptoms, or we just say reduce symptoms of the overall diagnosis, whatever that is for the objective. And then we're going to look at a couple of different things. At the very least, we should be including mental health, case management mental health, which is represented by MH, and case management client-centered consultation, which is represented by CCC. Most people are already doing therapy and counseling. That's included in almost every treatment plan across the organization, but add at least the mental health and the client-centered consultation, adding at least those things. Very important. Service mode, almost everybody's doing that individually. But if I found myself doing therapy case management as a group, then I want to have a different service line item because I can't select both individual and group. I'd have to add that. Then service place. Many people are selecting home, community, organization. That's totally fine as long as you're going to do that at some point in one of those or in those settings. If you feel like you're only going to be doing it in the office or in the community, go ahead and do that. Remember that community includes any of our locations that are outside of the outpatient center or the youth advocacy center, which is 1200 Locust Street. We oftentimes refer to this as like Casey's lobby, Casey's building. And so where Casey is, where others are practicing, that smaller building is that's in office. Or if I'm doing anything telehealth, whether that's phone or video, any of that type of stuff, then those are all coming from in office. The rest of them, the family centers, the place in Benton, if we're going to schools, all of those are considered community as far as the location of services. And then lastly, a reminder about the service agency / staff is that what we want to do here is we want to give them the agency, not the individual. So let's say I am doing case management mental health and I put my name there, say Matt Buckman will do the case management mental health. But then maybe Tia or Octavia or somebody else is involved in that care in some way and they want to start doing some case management mental health, or they're helping me on a case and they're doing some work with that family as well. In that situation, I just said me only. So what we want to do is we want to say the organization. So that way it includes all of us in a team-based care model. This is just an example of what that looks like. This is review from what you've seen before. And we're looking at plan part goal, putting that plan detail in there, plan part objective, and you can see you've got goal number 1, objective number 1, and we're sorting by 1.1. And then service type, plan part service type. We're not necessarily connecting it to a goal number and objective number, but you could here, and that your sort is 1.1.1. That's what's going to sort and connect everything together. And we're making our selections. Service frequency is an estimate of what you want to do. The only thing you don't want to do is have a service type that you never do. So you always want to do at least once that service type that you put in here. But the frequency is an estimate. All right, so now you're going to select Medicaid IETP as a service type in your therapy notes intake note, or Medicaid review update IETP. And that's if you've had a previous IETP or intake note doing the IM+CANS, then you're going to say review or update. If it's new and you've never done one, even if they're not a new client to you, you're going to do Medicaid IETP. That's the initial service type. Here's some sample objective content. I want you to really focus on this and think about what this says, because this is what you're going to be able to do to fill in activities during this holiday break or other breaks within the service year to help clients even when they're not available to us. And the objective content is the clinician review clinical records and documents available to formulate or confirm. So you can pick which one. If you already have a diagnosis, you're going to confirm it. A diagnosis and service recommendations using the IM+CANS tool. It is just a tool. It's not necessarily just a document. It's not just a note. This service was medically necessary. You have to say what was medically necessary for all IM+CANS assessments. These have to be justified by stating why they're medically necessary. And it's necessary in a simple way to assess the needs and strengths for the either initiation or continuation. If you're already serving them, you say continuation of services to reduce symptoms of whatever the diagnosis is. You can just say of diagnosis if you haven't decided, or if it's adjustment disorder, put adjustment disorder. In that intake note, we want to make sure we include the actual diagnosis and the mental health summary, the one that says something like, client is a 14-year-old male living in blah, 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 meets criteria for blah, 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 blah. That's the mental health summary. We want to be able to include that in there as the justification for the diagnosis. That does go there. Most of the other blanks, you're going to say see IM+CANS. In the intake note, though, we still have to have the objective content. So that's not included in see IM+CANS. The IM+CANS is really the location where the assessment tool is. This is justifying the activity of the assessment. And that's why you have to include the sample objective, or you have to include the objective content there. There's no place that you need to write report writing or form completion. That's not a service that is reimbursable. That's not what Medicaid, it's not a service hour. So just to complete documentation, it's like completing your notes. Your notes, progress notes, things like that are not reimbursable activities unless you're doing it with the client present and you're doing it together. So next steps. Once you've done that, I might have, maybe it's 2/3 of it done. And if I've already had an initial IM+CANS and now I'm doing an update IM+CANS, I might have all of it done in draft form. And then part two is let's include the family. Let's let them look at it. Let's finalize some of the scores, some of the information. Let's confirm some of the facts or let them add more or change whatever information was collected. Then we want to give them a finalized copy of this. And then we want to update our signatures, right? We want to get to that signature page, remembering that it's the final LPHA signature that completes that document. So you want to push it through the process of getting that to TIA or to Minthia. TIA in Carbondale or those in Benton, when you go to Carbondale, give those to TIA. TIA will be able to process that. You give them the signature page, give her the signature page with the IM+CANS attached. And you also have printed one off and given that to the family. There is a timeline for this though. So even if during like a downtime, I start this process, I have 30 days to complete that IM+CANS or IATP. I cannot go beyond 30 days. So it's important that we do complete this in a timely fashion. And every meeting after that, when I'm meeting with the family afterwards, I'm still, even if I did IATP initial and I did a lot of review of records and documentation and I completed a lot of the IM+CANS, then my second step, I'm still doing an IATP initial. So it's still the same service code. And it may be that I need to do that service code 2 or 3 times, but I can't do any other service types until I get that finalized, until I get that signature from caregiver, youth, and my own signature in there. Until I get that, I can't say that's finalized. So we have 30 days to finalize this. Later on, after finalizing it, submitting it to TIA or Minthia for the LPHA signature, later on, what you'll do is you're going to update the treatment plan. Even if you have a previous treatment plan, you want to update it. Maybe there's new information, maybe there's not, but you still want to update that treatment plan. That treatment plan is what triggers therapy notes to remind you when things are due. So you want to update that, and you want to update it to the last signature on the IM+CANS signature page. So if you ended up, let's say I did my initial meeting on December 20th, and then I finalized that January 5th with the family, and the family signed, the caregiver signed, the youth signed, and I signed January 5th, then my treatment plan date needs to be January 5th. And so that way it's matching and aligning with the date of the IM+CANS signatures. Here's an example of what that treatment plan looks like. And last but not least, if you ever want to look at definitions or more information, you can go to the Community-Based Behavioral Health Services Handbook. That link is here, and I'll attach that. So overall, what I want to say is make the experience easier for clients. You have things that at any down point during the year that you can update your IM+CANS, you can update the IATP, and you can get that started on behalf of clients without them having to be present. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your service. I hope that this is beneficial and helpful to you. And if you have any questions, do reach out, text, email, call, whatever you need to. Thank you very much.